topic to create a classroom group, and it's about digital citizenship. I know we also had another talk about the same topic, but it's a very um, interesting topic and a topic that, as you can see from the information, from the small box that you received showing the Eureka Live portal, is going to be is going to be the topic on digital citizenship for our returning weeks that will start next week, the 10th of October. So it's really important. It's really great that we are having with us David Ryan Polgar. He's going to be our expert, and I would like to thank him for accepting my invitation and organizing this event. So David is actually the head of trust and safety for the social messaging platform Friendbase in USA, and he's the co-founder of the Digital Citizenship Summit, which is hosted in Twitter headquarters, and it's going to be in October 28th this year. So I think he has many things to share with us, many interesting things that you can take into consideration when you plan your projects, and for it winning weeks that you are invited to organize projects on digital citizenship. So I just don't want to say no more. I just want to thank David once again and give the floor to him.
All right, Irene. Well, thank you for bringing me on here, and for everybody else all over Europe. Thank you for having me. This should be a great conversation. Um, what I'm going to be talking about today is not only what is digital citizenship, because there's a lot of great material already on digital citizenship, but from my background, I straddle a lot of different groups. These groups include education groups. I have a background as a college professor, but I've also been in the startup and tech world. Had a role with the social media company Ask.fm, and currently, as Irene pointed out, working for a social messaging startup out of Sweden called Friendbase. But I also have experience speaking to parents, speaking to kids, students, and various other different groups. And what we're going to be looking at today is, as an educator, digital citizenship as a concept has been a pretty popular topic, and only gaining more and more steam. As Irene pointed out, the main symposium utilizing digital citizenship as a main topic coming up October 27th through the 29th in Athens. But really what we can get at today is, how can we expand this idea of digital citizenship outside of the world of education? How can we expand this to administrators who are interested, to parents? How can we engage other stakeholders that are crucial to this? I'm going to be using the analogy of a wheel throughout today. And really what I'm getting at is that, as an educator, we're taking on the role of one spoke in this wheel, right? But digital citizenship as an issue is nuanced, it's complicated, it deals with many different factors. So if you don't mind, before we start, this is just a quick little story that should illustrate this kind of frame of mind that we really want to get in. In the United States, there was a story that I was reading where a principal at an elementary school for younger kids was upset that his students, right, 10 and 11-year-olds, were utilizing Instagram. And as you know, Instagram, like most social media companies, major social media companies, have an age restriction of 13 or above. And the principal was upset that the under 13 students were utilizing Instagram. So he sent a letter to the parents. One of the parents got upset and posted this online and started complaining about it and saying, how dare the principal encroach on my right as a parent? This story really illustrates that there's so many intersecting interests when we're dealing with the social media and tech use of children and teens, right? We obviously have children and teens as stakeholders, but we also have the educator interest in what they're educating in the classroom. We have administrators who oftentimes are worried about certain lawsuits, how technology can be potentially abused in the classroom. how this can be an invasion of privacy. But then you also have the industry. So in that situation that I mentioned, should Instagram be taking a stronger role in preventing under 13-year-olds from getting into their site, right? And if they should be, how can they, from a technical standpoint, do this? As Irene mentioned, I am the co-founder of something called the Digital Citizenship Summit. Our major goal right there is to unite multiple stakeholders in solving these issues, right? And what I like to say, and I'll go to the slide, it's trying to promote the safe, savvy, and ethical use of social media and tech. Really, what this slide right here is illustrating is, again, this analogy that I'm using is that we as educators are spoke in the wheel. I mention this because with my experience in all of these different stakeholder groups, there is a common level of confusion when we're dealing with digital citizenship. Oftentimes, I'll talk to somebody and they'll say, well, isn't digital citizenship only in education? Isn't that only dealing with education? I've had other people who are saying, well, isn't digital citizenship only an issue for industry? And what these individuals are missing is that we're all playing a crucial part in improving how children, teens, and adults utilize social media and technology. This is important because we cannot approach digital citizenship as a topic that we can know and then pass on, right? And we know this as an educator. So let's imagine somebody wants to teach me when was the last successful invasion of England, and then I learned that it was 1066 by William the Conqueror, right? That is a tidbit. That is factual information that can then be spread onto somebody, right? So an educator or an organization could spread that information or that knowledge or that factoid onto somebody else, right? It's a one-way form of communication. My major point, and the point of this discussion, is that digital citizenship needs to move away, and I've seen this in my own experience with the Digital Citizenship Summit, it needs to move away from a one-way form of dissemination of material, and it needs to engage all of these different stakeholder groups so we can start having conversation. Because again, as I illustrated with that opening story, digital citizenship is a complicated, nuanced topic that is extremely thorny, right? It deals with a lot of different strongly held opinions. But in order for what we call buy-in, right, in order for people to adopt the concept of digital citizenship, they need to feel like they have a voice. We know that educators have a voice because digital citizenship has been around in the education community for a number of years. If you really dig into the issue, it's been talked about for a little over 10 years now. The reason why I say that is because oftentimes my own experience, I might be speaking to a parenting group, or I do some TV, radio, and for that audience, they've never heard the term digital citizenship. They think that I'm creating this term of digital citizenship, which obviously I am not, and I didn't, right? So it showcases that digital citizenship has a tremendous opportunity to expand on its knowledge base, right? The education community, what we're doing today, the education community has done a significant amount of valuable research on this area of digital citizenship. However, it hasn't been able to fully spread to the larger community. And really, what I'm getting at today in this slideshow is why hasn't it spread as much as it could, right? And can we learn from some of the issues that I've encountered personally with the Digital Citizenship Summit, trying to unite these stakeholders? Can we learn something from it that we can apply throughout the world? And I would like to add that the framework that personally I'm taking as the co-founder of the Digital Citizenship Summit is a global perspective, right? A very global perspective. For our upcoming summit that's going to be the 28th of October, we have speakers coming in from England, Spain, Sweden, Australia, Ireland, India. So the point is, in education, we constantly like to promote best practices. We like to learn from somebody else, right? If you send me some research and I find that research valuable, I should be able to build upon that research to further the issue, right? To expand on digital citizenship. However, one of the problems that is currently going on with digital citizenship is that we are still what we call siloed, right? We're still in our separate communities, uh, and we're not spreading that information, right, fully. And I'm seeing kind of one of the comments, and I think it's kind of dealing with the issue that oftentimes we have the concept of attribute to attribute, right, to fully give credit for these educators that are building upon it. And actually, you'll see in one of the slides as kind of a digital citizenship joke, Dr. Mike Ribble out of the state of Kansas in the United States, he's the individual who should be credited with developing the 9 elements of digital citizenship, but oftentimes people just copy and paste the 9 elements without crediting, which is somewhat ironic given the topic of digital citizenship dealing with digital laws. Okay, again, let's think about the multiple stakeholders. And what we're finding is that what we can do with digital citizenship is have more of a paradigm shift in our thinking. Digital citizenship is all over the map right now in terms of its approach. You see its approach differently throughout different communities in the United States and throughout the world. Can we create a more of a cohesive nature, right? And just even think about the classroom. When you're teaching a topic in the classroom, right? When I was teaching a topic, I was brought in as an expert, but it wasn't me alone. I also had a textbook, right? I was building on what we call like building on the shoulders of giants, right? We're still building on some base level of agreement. Although there's lots of great digital citizenship books, we still have not reached a point where we have a cohesive agreement on digital citizenship and how it should be approached. So that's a lot of what we're discussing today, is how we can do this to a larger extent. The stakeholders, and please feel free to write in any additional ones that you can think of, because that's what's been very exciting since launching the Digital Citizenship Summit last year. We get emails throughout the world of different groups that we never would have thought of, right? I had somebody the other day dealing with eating disorders who thought that this was an interesting issue because, well, eating disorders sometimes can be impacted by our online communities and how it in particular displays female beauty, right? So that was interesting because I had never thought of that. So there's lots of people who are tangentially related to the idea of digital citizenship because it's a broad umbrella term. But generally speaking, the significant stakeholders that we see over and over are obviously educators. Educators have been the backbone of digital citizenship and have been the group that have brought it to this point in 2016 and are doing the kind of heavy lifting with the research, with the quote unquote thought leadership, as we like to say. But then also within education, you have librarians, media specialists, and then also administrators. They're separate stakeholders because especially administrators versus educators oftentimes have different frame of references. As I pointed out before, administrators are often, at least in the United States, are very concerned about tech use and how it might impact them from a legal standpoint. They're worried about major topics like sexting, sextortion, revenge porn, stalking, cyberbullying, online harassment. The list goes on, right? There's a lot of different concerns. That might be different than educators. educators to a large extent, and I know there's disagreement, but educators to a large extent are trying to balance the risks and rewards, and they, as a group, I think it's safe to say, have realized that you can't necessarily shut off the internet, as the joke goes. So how can we create a safer online experience, increase digital citizenship, right? So we're savvier, but then also really embrace those kind of digital skills that are going to be essential for the 21st century, right? As educators, we're educating today's youth to be engaged in tomorrow's world, right? I think it's safe to say that the opportunities that social media and technology offer greatly outweigh the risks. But that being said, the risks are obviously significant and very serious. But at the same time, how can we take both of the risks and reward and then wrap that up as opposed to solely talk about one of those issues? In addition, another major stakeholder group that we're seeing time and time again is obviously Silicon Valley tech companies, major tech companies, social media companies, and education technology companies. They're usually shortened to quote unquote the ed tech sector. Those would be the major forms of technology that are utilized in the classroom. This really dovetails nicely with digital citizenship because this group has to be engaged, but there's a lot of complication about how education technology is being incorporated in the classroom. In addition, you have a lot of organizations, whether they are governmental organizations or what we call NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And what I'm personally seeing is that there's a handful, right? There's so many great organizations that are producing extremely valuable research materials, posters to be used in the classroom. So how do we incorporate this knowledge base of organizations to better disseminate that material, but then also increase the kind of engagement in the community? Because as I was talking about in the beginning, we want to ensure that that it is not just a one-way form of communication. It's not just the organization that's pushing material upon the recipient, but it's also me as the receiver of this information that can then turn it around and say, well, here's my ideas. Here's what I'm seeing, right? Again, when you think about the concept of a conversation is not one way. A conversation is constantly dealing with two ways of communication, right? You're sending a message and then the recipient, it can send one back and they can react to it and we can mold that conversation, right? Digital citizenship is not as you well know, right, is not a topic that is decided today. It's a topic that is constantly changing and being molded by the people that are involved. That's why it's a community and that's why it's a movement. However, there's a lot of missing pieces right now in this movement. The most common one that people mention is it's been somewhat difficult, and we've had difficulty with the summit. It's very difficult right now to engage parents. Educators, especially connected educators, have been highly engaged, and I think it's also a practical standpoint. I know when we're trying to do something, it's easy to send out something on Twitter and get feedback, right? So connected educators, by their very nature, because they're connected, are easier to reach. So that is one of the struggles: is how do we then reach parents who might be less apt to be on Twitter? How do we reach parents that might feel disengaged from their school and unclear about the policies within education? And how do we engage parents that might feel a certain level of distrust? Right? How do we engage a parent who might say, well, I don't necessarily feel comfortable about some of the policies of Facebook, right? The point that we're trying to make with engaging multiple stakeholders is that there is going to be disagreement. but disagreement is healthy in a democracy, right? Disagreement is something that we can build upon, because if we don't have that disagreement, then we're only taking one side's view. And digital citizenship as a concept is something that needs to build upon multiple viewpoints, right? And of course, that's messy and that's complicated, but I think that that's the way to go. Okay, I kind of already talked about this, so I can probably pass through it. But really, what this slide is just getting at is saying that I'm talking today from multiple kind of viewpoints, and I think that's the point we really want to hammer home, is that we need to take multiple viewpoints in order to have digital citizenship be a fully invested movement that has the perspective of educators, administrators, parents, organizations, industry, right? And again, it's easier said than done because these groups don't always get along, right? If you have a parent and you have somebody from Facebook in the same room, they might get into a heated conversation, right? Like I said, the parent might say, I disagree with your privacy policy. And and Facebook might think that the parent is exaggerating the potential risks to their son or daughter, right? So right there, because of the lack of engagement, we have a lack of understanding. So in order for us to have greater buy-in, we need to actually bring these groups together. The Digital Citizenship Summit came about based on the idea that I know from personal experience, I was going to a lot of conferences, but they were always one side, right? I even have a conference coming up where it's just parents discussing digital citizenship. And then I'll go to another conference where it's just educators. And then you have another one where it's just administrators. And then you have industry, which is also somewhat in its own type of silo, right? How can we again bring those groups together? Okay, so again, that's what I'm doing. That's me and my co-founder, Dr. Mary Alice Curran. And last year when we started this, that was really our big teachable moment, is that again, we need to bring these different voices together, because by getting those different voices, we learn something, right? So the idea that I'm proposing is that you shouldn't just listen to me, right? You shouldn't just listen to somebody else, that I am one voice, right? And then somebody else who's talking about digital citizenship is another voice. Because let's face it, we all have our own interpretations, we all have our own bias. My background is going to influence my opinion upon social media and technology. You have to take everything with a grain of salt. And we can do that by creating a more cohesive coalition. But that coalition has to have the underlying ethos that the opinions are respected. Almost this desire for a diversity of ideas, a diversity of opinions. Here's some just quick pictures on the Digital Citizenship Summit. Some really great overlap with Safer Internet Day. Some of the folks that plan Safer Internet Day in the United States, that's done by the organization called Connect Safely. Connect Safely is also involved with the Digital Citizenship Summit. I've also been in touch with some of the folks at Safer Internet Day out of Brussels. But what I like about it, and this shows you how the topic of digital citizenship has changed, is last year when we started, we ran with the tagline of "Be the digital change," right? Obviously based on Gandhi, but updated for the maybe it's Gandhi 2.0, right? Be the digital change. I was also excited to see that Safer Internet Day, happening on February 7th of 2017, is running with the slogan "Be the change." The reason why this is crucial, and again, obviously a slogan is only so important, but the reason why this is crucial is because it's showcasing that, again, there's a paradigm shift. What I've seen from my own personal experience is that digital citizenship is sometimes approached in a protectionist manner, right? We need to protect children and teens. But now it's slowly moving away to something that's saying, well, wait a minute. Children and teens are stakeholders, right? They need adult guidance. They need educators. They need organization, thought leadership. But at the same time, they are stakeholders that should feel empowered, right? So how can we educate, empower, and engage children and teens to be digital citizens that feel comfortable about being the digital change, right? Again, words only go so far, so this is why it's multifaceted. Because of course it's not just students, right? It also needs to be Silicon Valley that's making safer platforms, that's improving the ways to report harassment, that's increasing tools against that. It also needs to be education policies about how this is incorporated in the classroom and how we incorporate new curriculum that's coming out. What I also liked, and this is kind of interesting to think about, is on these pictures that you see, you also see these post-it notes that were done. That was a wall where people said, well, what is digital citizenship to you? I really learned a lot from looking at those because I saw so many different definitions. And I know sometimes as educators, we greatly appreciate lots of different definitions. But what I've also seen from talking to parents and talking on what they call lifestyle TV shows is that that complication, that nuance can be confusing from a general public perspective. And I see somebody just wrote in that digital citizenship has many different definitions. So actually, I'm going to get over to that in one of our problems. Really, from the experience of launching and running the Digital Citizenship Summit, five major, and of course there's more, but five major problems have come up that have showcased how difficult it is to unite these multiple stakeholders. But at the same time, these problems are also opportunities if we understand the underlying problem and can come up with ways to fix it. So as the person pointed out, right, in the chat, there's multiple definitions. Well, that's not necessarily a good thing from the idea of spreading something, right? And actually, the slideshow that I made is actually based. That's why you see the duct tape. It's based on a book called Made to Stick. The book Made to Stick gets at the concept of spreadability, as they call it. The spreadability of a concept is its quote unquote stickiness. But what they pointed out in that book is in order for an idea to spread, it needs to be shareable. It needs to be memorable. It needs to be quotable. The problem that digital citizenship potentially has faced in the past is that because it has multiple definitions, it's not easy to share, right? If I was having a beer with somebody else and they said, "Hey, David, what is digital citizenship?" and I don't know a quick definition to give them, then they're now not going to be able to spread the idea of digital citizenship, right? Then in order for anything to spread, it needs to be defined in a manner that people can remember and that also is sensical in how they interpret it. Again, as the commenter pointed out, lots of different definitions, right? So digital citizenship, and this is the main one, at least that I see in the United States. I need to come to Europe a little more often. Please, if anybody wants to invite me, I'll stay on your couch. I don't take up a lot. I'll take a short shower. As I was pointing out, kind of before we started, it kind of made me jealous. I need a vacation. Americans don't take enough vacations. So the main definition that we see is digital citizenship is the norms of appropriate, responsible technology use. Okay, that's the one that comes from Dr. Mike Ribble, who's also involved with the Digital Citizenship Summit. Great guy, and that's from digitalcitizenship.net. Dr. Mike Ribble is also the individual who developed the 9 elements of digital citizenship, as we'll see in a little bit. That definition translates, right, on the education level, but it doesn't always connect. At least I've seen from my personal experience, it doesn't always connect on the parent level and the new person, right, the outsider level. And the reason is because if you look at the definition, it actually requires a certain level of previous knowledge on the topic of digital citizenship because its definition, the norms of appropriate responsible technology use. Well, first off, the average parent might not use that term norms, right? That is a very academic phrase. In academia, right? And again, I have a background as an educator. We have a tendency to, as you know, we have a tendency to use terms that are not always used at the cafe, right? We use words like pedagogical, right? When was the last time you were sitting around having a beer and somebody who wasn't an educator used the word pedagogical? The reason why I mention that is because how we talk in academia needs to be altered in the spreading of a message, right? That's actually communication 101. If you're taking a public speaking class, the idea of public speaking is not how eloquent you are, it's not how large of a word you're using. It's based on the ability of a recipient to receive the message that you're trying to send, right? So we have a message that we're trying to send on digital citizenship, but oftentimes it's not received because it's not understood, okay? That's why with the Digital Citizenship Summit, we use a more, what I would consider approachable language of the safe, savvy, and ethical use of social media and tech or technology. What you see is that safe, savvy, and ethical, as we'll talk about in a little bit, it covers the major areas, the major groups on digital citizenship, but at the same time becomes a little more definitive in what it's talking about. Instead of saying it's the norms of appropriate responsible technology use, it clearly is giving some parent, let's say, better relationship, right? When somebody is learning, as you know from education, when somebody is learning a new phrase, they need to have a word that triggers a response, a word that triggers some type of relationship with it. So if they hear the word safe, well, then they're thinking of online safety. They're thinking of digital footprints, digital tattoos, again, sexting, sextortion, revenge porn, passwords, online safety, right? That's what they're thinking. When they think of savvy, they're thinking of digital skills, digital access, right? How can we expand on that? How can a child or a teen, create a PowerPoint presentation? How can they create a YouTube video? And when they're thinking of ethics, now we're talking about, Creative Commons, copyright, digital laws, right? It gives a better baseline of their own previous experience. In order for you to remember a term, you generally need to relate it to something else, right? When you say the norms of appropriate responsible use, unless you're already in digital citizenship, that might not strike a chord with you. Whereas safe, savvy, ethical, although it's still abstract in nature, and we'll talk about that in a little bit to be more concrete with the language, it still can relate to something we have experience with. The other issue, and this is related to the definition, is we need a starting point. And I actually, I really thought about this because I do a lot of TV show appearances, And every time you go on TV, they always pretty much want you to do the same thing. They'll say, send us some notes and tell us the 3 tips that you're going to cover, right? The human brain, this is backed up, uh, the human brain tends to favor threes. And that's why in a lot of public speaking, you see 3 things listed. The human brain remembers 3 things, right? When you go to 4, a lot of times that's seen as too much, and 2 is seen as not enough. The 9 elements of digital citizenship are wonderful, right? We have based the Digital Citizenship Summit on those 9 elements. However, the opportunity I see within education and digital citizenship to spread it better is we can start differently and then expand to the 9, right? So if you start with safe, savvy, and ethical, now you have, quote unquote, hooked an individual. Now you have given them something they can relate to, and they're open for a conversation. They're open for understanding something, right? Think about every time you're in the classroom teaching students. In order for them to get to step B, they first need to go through step A. Educators, by our very nature, we tend to think in esoteric fashion, nuanced fashion, tend to go into education because we appreciate nuance. However, that's not necessarily the way that the general public outside of academia relates to it. So the opportunity that I'm seeing is if we can again start with a more baseline definition that's all inclusive, right? And again, the disagreement might be, oh, is that too simple of a definition? Okay, that's a fair point. However, I would say that it can be all inclusive. I'm even seeing this in the United States as they're trying to expand on this. The struggle that people have is that digital citizenship draws in the online safety community, it draws in the DigCit community, right? And then it draws in the media literacy community. Well, we need something that is a broad umbrella term to say that digital citizenship, like citizenship, is again not something that we learn, it's a lifestyle, right? It's something that's continuous, something that's a way of being. As I like to kind of point out, there's a difference between being a user of Facebook and being a digital citizen that is cognizant of the larger community. Being a digital citizen that appreciates the global connectedness that online social media technology offers. To be a digital citizen that really is trying to capture the total benefit, right, of social media and tech. The third problem is that, and I've seen this time and time again, oftentimes digital citizenship gets confused as being completely synonymous with online safety, but it's not, right? Online safety is a major part of digital citizenship, but digital citizenship is not online safety, right? It's the problem sometimes of how we think about terms. The reason why I think safe, savvy, and ethical use of social media and technology works is because in that very baseline starter definition, you are showcasing that online safety is a component, a major component, but it's not the only component. Because think about what follows next, right? You have the alliteration safe and savvy, but the savviness indicates that digital citizenship is going to be a constant balancing act between being safe online and appreciating the benefits that we can receive online. It's very similar, and a lot of people make this point, it's very similar in nature to driving a vehicle, right? And that's why a lot of times people think of digital citizenship as a online driver's license. Because We could talk for hours about the dangers of driving, about drinking and driving, about texting and driving. I could show you accident after accident. I could show you mangled bodies, right? Lots of bad stuff happens with driving. However, none of you would argue that kids, when they reach the driver's age, should drive, right? So we're willing to accept the inherent risks of driving because we realize that that benefit greatly outweighs the risks. So of course, there is a chance that the driver gets in an accident. There's a chance of tragedy. However, we're focused on the idea of improving roads, improving driving, right? So that's a metaphor for digital citizenship, right? That's very similar to driving because there's multiple aspects of it that we're trying to improve. We need to move it away from solely online safety because digital citizenship is larger, right? As the 9 elements point out, it's a larger topic than solely online safety because the the problem that that presents is if you only think in what not to do, then you've shut off that conversation, right? Our end goal is not merely safety, but it's also to have our children and teens be savvy online, right? To be digital citizens that can connect, that can produce great material, right? It's an optimistic viewpoint of technology, but at the same time recognizing that there's some pretty large issues to clear up as well, right? So that's a difference in framework. Do we frame it as a negative or do we frame it as a positive? Personally, I would argue that we need to frame it in a tech positive manner of again, safe, savvy, and ethical use of social media and technology that is cognizant of dangers, but at the same time, not ending the conversation at, all right, we're all safe. Because we can be safer by not using a smartphone. We can be safer by not going online. But if I don't go online, if I didn't go online, then I wouldn't be talking with you today, right? Think about what the online community has brought out tremendous benefits. So we need to take a balancing act approach. And again, there seems to be a little confusion from what I've seen in especially parenting groups that might only think, if they have any awareness of digital citizenship, they might only think of it in terms of online safety. The problem, of course, is if we start getting into a long argument about citizenship, that might not be a topic that they're ready to talk about. It needs to be something a little more clear and concise, like safe, savvy, and ethical. Okay, lots of different stakeholder groups, and again, as I talked about in the introduction, these stakeholder groups have dramatically different frames of reference and dramatically different interests when they're thinking about digital citizenship. We need to be more inclusive with how we approach digital citizenship so we can learn from these different groups. Okay? This is really just the concept of breaking down silos and bringing these groups together so we can have insight. What I like to say when I'm speaking with parenting groups is, again, this is not a topic that you should just read about and then talk to your child about. This is a topic that you should have a voice at that table, right? You should be sitting at the table and have some potential influence on how technology is being developed. The reason why our upcoming Digital Citizenship Summit is at Twitter headquarters is because we need to bring together those different groups, right? So of course, there might be disagreement between a parent, between an administrator and somebody at Twitter or other tech companies that will be in the audience. However, what better way to influence how technology is implemented, how technology is created, than to actually bring together different groups and then have their voices heard. Okay, the last problem I said I was bringing up the 5 problems is we cannot think of digital citizenship as a statement, but instead it's a conversation. A conversation is fluid. A conversation is alive, as I point out right here. These are just common elements that always happen, right? Common discussions. You've got the parent who says, I'm concerned about what my child's doing online. You have the educator who's saying, I want to improve digital skills. And then you are having the student who's saying, wait a minute, don't merely protect me, respect me, right? I want my voice to be heard as well. So that's why student voice is a major component of digital citizenship as well. So lastly, and we're kind of nearing the end, and then we'll hopefully go over some great questions, is we want to educate, empower, and engage, right? Education is not the sole focus because education oftentimes is the dissemination of material. But we also want to engage that larger community and put those folks together to form the wheel of digital citizenship. And in addition, we want to empower people as citizens. Again, we're not mere users, we're digital citizens. We should be aware of the larger community. When I go on to Twitter today, I'm going on alone, but I'm not alone, right? The more I can feel that I'm part of a larger community, the more I'll be aware when I see something that's not appropriate. The more I'll be aware to be cognizant of how I post, right? Because I empathize with other people's feelings. Okay, and this is the last slide. If anybody feels like getting in contact, please do. I'm always reachable. So my website, techethicist.com. For the summit, easy to remember if you go to bethedigitalchange.com. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. And then I've got my email there as well. And feel free to tune in with the Digital Citizenship Summit on the 28th of October. We're also live streaming that to a global audience through Twitter's @safety account, through kind of their Periscope application. So we'd love for everybody to get involved with that. So Irene, is there any questions that we want to go over now, or would you like me to read some of them?
I'm just having a look. It was really interesting. So there is one from Francesca. How can we start this process in our community?
Sure. Yeah, and with that, what you want to do is think multifaceted, right? When you're starting that conversation in your community, you need to, again, instantly think, in that room, I don't just want parents. I want parents and educators. Because oftentimes, those parents are going to be asking, hey, well, what's going on with technology in the classroom? I was just at a parenting event where that's where the parents were saying, but you know what? There were no educators in the room. Those educators would have been invaluable. In addition, from a practical standpoint, in order to get the conversation going in your community, you need to use language that people understand, right? So for example, if you're trying to reach an audience who's never heard of the term digital citizenship, you can't necessarily make a poster and put digital citizenship event, please stop by. You're not going to get a big attendance because the audience doesn't understand the term, so they move on to the next idea. That's the difference between abstract language and concrete language. So what I would recommend if we're building that discussion in our community is to bring out those concrete examples that the audience would relate to. So for example, let's imagine that there's a new topic going on about something that happened with Facebook, right? Maybe you list that out on the poster on your communications, right? Something that the person reading can say, ah, okay, I see what this topic is going to be all about. Right? Uh, Okay, let's see. See if there's any more questions. And I really learned a lot of this. I remember one time where I had a poster. I was speaking at an event, and because they put that I was talking about technology use, right here I was talking about ethical issues of social media. Because it said the word tech in it, a woman, a older female in the audience, she stood up and she asked me to fix her computer. And then I had another person who asked me how they could maximize their website, right? So the point from that is that we need to be a little more precise with our language in order for the audience to understand what we're going to be discussing, right? Digital citizenship as a relatively new term and an unknown term to a very large percentage of the world's population, it needs the explaining of what we're going to be discussing. And I think that's why safe, savvy, and ethical use of social media and technology. So please, please run with that. I think that's a good starting point. And then underneath, you could list some of the major topics that would come up. In addition, oftentimes when you're having that conversation, there's a good way to tie in with events that are going on. So, for example, with the Digital Citizenship Summit, we tied it in with the upcoming Media Literacy Week. So we said, well, that's an interesting way to expand on the idea of digital citizenship to indicate that's not only online safety. So we partnered up with the group behind Media Literacy Week, and that's just going to be a good way to, again, bring in that stakeholder group. Okay, I'm looking
Perfect.
at some of these conversations. And what I will say, because I see a bunch of people mentioning global, what's been interesting about that is up to this point, I don't think that we have gone global enough as a digital citizenship community, which is ironic, right? Because we're all global, right? We're all connected, right? I'm sitting here in the United States, but then I'm talking to you from all over the world. So likewise, why aren't we sharing our ideas? Why aren't I getting a great idea from Turkey, from Greece, right? Why aren't I incorporating these ideas in what I'm discussing to a group? I should be, right? The idea of promoting best practices shouldn't be limited to country borders, but oftentimes it is. The reason, when I've looked into it and talked to other people, the reason is because oftentimes our organizations are based on a country level, right? It's obviously a little different in Europe, combining the different countries in the EU, but in most other countries, oftentimes those organizations are formed at the country level. Therefore, everything stays, their interest is to stay within the country. Whereas I think we have the opportunity to combine as a global community and say, you know what? I like what they're doing in Australia. Why don't we adopt that? Obviously, again, there'll be some disagreement because there's dramatic differences of opinion, especially when you look into the American viewpoint versus the overall kind of European perspective on a topic like the right to be forgotten. The right to be forgotten doesn't exist in the United States and probably won't in the near future. And a lot of that is our different conceptions over how we weigh privacy versus the freedom of speech, specifically children's privacy is not as strongly weighed in the United States as it is elsewhere.
So I have a question. Just give me a second to read
I like
it.
that somebody wrote they've already joined the Digital Citizenship Summit community, so thank you for that and welcome. And please, that's the idea. This is open door type of policy because we don't know what we don't know, right? Kind of idea is I love receiving emails where somebody's saying, well, don't you know that this event is going on? So even Irene, when you talked about Athens, now we're hoping maybe there's a way we can connect with the conversation going on in Athens from the 27th of October through the 29th of October with what's going on with the Digital Citizenship Summit at Twitter in San Francisco, California on the 28th of October, right? We should be connecting all of these different movements. Why are we reinventing the wheel when we have very talented educators and other stakeholders that are doing amazing work, right? If we can better connect that, and as one of the early comments pointed out, if we can credit that individual appropriately, then I think we have an amazing opportunity to really build on this together.
And there is a question about, so you already said digital citizenship is a live term. So where do you this term is going to be in the next 10 years? Why do you essentially suggest us to educate tomorrow's decision makers of digital citizenship? And apart from,
Yeah, well, that's an interesting topic because a hot debate online, at least I've seen on Twitter, is should we remove the word digital from digital citizenship? Should we just call it citizenship? Personally, I say no, and the reason is because I think the education community that I'm a part of, that the education community is a couple years ahead of the general public on this issue. So what educators were talking about 4 years ago is where the general public is today, right? So yes, eventually I think we'll get rid of the term digital from citizenship, right? 10 years from now, it'll probably just be a part. It'll be embedded within our conception of citizenship. But I think that it is still such an unknown term to a lot of parents, to a lot of other groups that we still have a lot of work to do. And why not build on this great level of knowledge and research that we have just kind of sitting there. Also with digital citizenship, a lot of people mention, should we incorporate more leadership? Well, of course, right? That's where I was talking about the element of empowerment. And we're trying to, again, be very all-inclusive with that movement that everybody's a part of, right? We're all part of it. We really want to think of digital citizenship as a movement that's leaderless. If you look into a flock of birds and how birds move, if you've ever looked into that, birds work as a group and they don't actually have a leader of the pack, which is very interesting, right? But somehow they move in a direction together. It's very similar, I think, analogous to digital citizenship and how it can move as a community.
okay,
Some
and
great some great comments. I was just laughing at. Yeah.
okay, so from Glyceria, apart from the experiential part, how could we help our students?
Mhm. Yeah, you can help the students by incorporating curriculum that is more kind of widely verified. One of the things that I find personally a little strange is that uh, right now digital citizenship has been very capricious. It's been very based on that specific educator as opposed to that educator tying in with the larger community. So I would say from the educator educating students, what you want to do is tie yourself into the larger network so you're constantly getting the best practices. I had a event a couple months ago where a this parenting event, and a woman stood up in the front row and she said, just give me a couple websites I should go to. And I thought it was a little strange because digital citizenship, unfortunately, is not an issue where I can just give out two websites and then, oh, all of a sudden, life is great. You're a digital citizen. It doesn't work like that, right? As you well know, it's something that we're constantly working at, constantly evolving. So to kind of fully answer that question of how to educate students, uh, part of that is going to really be indicating to that student, right, or to the students in your classroom, that it's not something that you as an educator are protecting them from. What you're doing is you, right? You're an educator, you're an expert. You're giving them guidance. You're giving them material. You're challenging them mentally to have that emotional growth. But at the same time, you want to incite a certain level of empowerment within that student body, right? Because we can't constantly be watching every little aspect of what students and children and teens are doing online, right? So the more we can incorporate that as a skill set that we're educating, that's something that can be carried on. What I like to say is we are the web, right? The web is not happening to us. We are the web. So when we see negative material online, that's really a reflection on humanity. That's a reflection on our inability to create a better system, not a boogeyman. It's not social media doing it. It's people on social media, and we are people, right? So that's something that should really be a kind of lesson for that. So again, when teaching students on digital citizenship, the more we can, as I like to say, educate, empower, and engage, the better. And a lot of that is going to be those students all have parents with strongly held opinions. So the more that you as an educator can also engage their parents, and a lot of educators right now, they're forming events that are happening at their school where they're saying, okay, let's have educators and parents and students there at that event. That's what we need to see, right? We need to have that panel discussion where there's a student on the panel, there's an educator on the panel, and there's a parent, because they all have different beliefs, and nobody's wrong, right? So that parent is not wrong for their opinion, for their preference towards greater online safety, but that should be weighed against the educator who's also has some strongly held opinions. All right, Irene, are there any other? I'm looking at,
I
yes, we
cannot
are the
see,
web.
yeah, I cannot see any other question, and I have to say that according to the comments that I read, okay, everything you said, it's really interesting, and you gave us food for thought. And I can say
Terrific.
that, yeah, in our returning community, actually, maybe I can boast that we are digital citizens in a way, because we use best practices, we like to share things, we help each other, it's a safe environment. So I think we have made a good start on digital citizenship.
I definitely think we have.
So if there's no more questions, I would like to thank you for all
Thank
this
you for having me.
useful information. And you share all your information, all your Twitter, email. So I suppose that
Yes, yeah,
people
please stay in touch.
can stay in touch, and I will share with you the recording as well. So thank you once again, and we will be in touch.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Irene. Thank you, everybody.